Unfazed by the brouhaha over his remarks to Bloomberg Television in Singapore, India's Chief of Defence Staff, General Anil Chauhan, has made a set of new big statements on Operation Sindoor, including likening Pakistan's defeat to an innings defeat in a cricket test match where wickets lost by the winning side do not matter. His comments made in a speech in Maharashtra come amid a raging debate over narrative wars. There are those who believe that General Chauhan should not have spoken at all to Bloomberg Television. There are those who believe that it's not the military, but diplomats who should be going out there carrying India's message. The cross-party delegations are already attempting to do that, but the debate continues not over the military battle, which clearly was India's victory, but over how the narrative should be handled. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, Chief of Defence Staff General Anil Chauhan finds himself in the headlines again. Just a couple of days ago, his remarks to Bloomberg Television as well as Reuters on the sidelines of the Shangri-La Summit in Singapore made headlines after he spoke of tactical mistakes that were rectified and remedied to hit Pakistan with a winning force. Today, General Chauhan, evidently unfazed by anybody who thought he shouldn't have said what he said, actually spoke once again in response to a question about losses. He likened what had happened with Pakistan in Operation Sindoor to the metaphor. He used the analogy of a cricket match. He said it's like a test match where there's a winning side, and then the winning side shouldn't or needn't obsess about wickets lost. These comments by General Chauhan come amidst a debate over the narrative wars, over whether India should care about how Western media is reporting the story, about how Western governments are responding, about Donald Trump's increasingly bizarre claims, and about America's attempts to rehyphenate the India-Pakistan relationship, something that, of course, India does not want. Let's introduce our guests on the program today as we look at General Chauhan's new statements. This on a day when Pakistan's own dossier, a dossier that we have accessed, reveals that the scale of Operation Sindoor was much larger than even our own side has officially admitted. In fact, this dossier shows you how areas in Peshawar, Karachi, Hyderabad in Pakistan were among 28 locations that were hit in Indian strikes in the 4-day war. This is Islamabad's own dossier. Let me introduce our guests on the program today. Dilip Cherian, political analyst, brand guru, is with us. Good to see you. Also joining us is General Shukla, a military veteran. Good to have you back with us, sir. Tavleen Singh is with us. She is somebody who in her Indian Express column has spoken about the narrative war, and we'll see how she looks at the CDS's remarks, both the weekend remarks and today's remarks. And Sushant Sareen, one of India's finest strategic affairs minds, is with us as well. Welcome, everybody. I want to get straight to it. I want to play out General Chauhan's new remarks made in an interaction in Pune, where he basically responded to a question about losses. And he said, look, it's like a test match. You win. At the end of the win, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to get into the sort of details of how many wickets you may or may not have lost on the way to the win. I'm paraphrasing. Take a look for yourself.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for your insightful lecture on future wars and warfare. So my question is, what are the losses incurred or experienced by Pakistani side during Operation Sindoor? And from this, what can be the potential strategic insight we can draw for future conflicts and the evolution of warfare?
Very nice question. You know, when I was asked about losses on our side, I said these are not important. The results and how you act is important. So, it would be not very correct to talk about losses. Means numbers. Means I'll give a detailed kind of an answer on this. Usually in a match, suppose you go into a football match and you win 3-2, he scored 2 goals and you scored 4 goals, so that's an even seven. But suppose you go on in a test match, cricket test match, and you win by any defeat, then there's no question of how many wickets and how many balls and how many players. But since there is always this inquisitivity as to the result of your strikes, which was visible, which was more a psychological domain and what was visible to us, all of us, I mean, not to us, to globally, to everyone. So, based on technical parameters like electronic intelligence, signal intelligence, at some point of time, we will take out this particular data and share it with us to answer those queries and give criticisms of people like you who keep telling me how many aircraft did we destroy, how many missiles did we destroy. We will make a rough assessment of that and come out with that shortly.
One last question.
All right, let's open this up. I'll start with you, General Shukla, because in the immediate, by the way, the image you see on your screen is an extract from Islamabad's own dossier that it is circulating across the globe. This adds locations that that we haven't even officially listed yet. It includes places like Peshawar, Karachi, Hyderabad, the Hyderabad in Pakistan, Jhang, Sakhar, also in Sindh, and so on. Now, my question to you, General Shukla, on General Chauhan. Absolutely unfazed by anybody who thought he shouldn't have said what he said to Bloomberg, shouldn't have said it where he said it, shouldn't have said it how he said it. He basically is saying, how does it matter? To which a similar point you made, you said in a boxing bout, you may scrape your knees, what matters is what happens in the end. How do you see General Chauhan's new remarks? How do you see this debate over the narrative wars?
So, see, Barkha, when this morning somebody from your channel rang up and said, we'll talk about this. So, away from the din and the noise, I just jotted down a few points and just let me put them for wider debate before the panel. One is, see, I'm saying that, this action, narration, calculus, both are important. I'm not for a moment saying that, we've been told, we were told in our younger years, let the guns do the talking. So that's fine. But I'm making this point that narration is also important. Having said that, let's see how this played out, in terms of the statecraft, the actors, personas, and the key metrics. And let's look at it dispassionately. See the politico-military signaling first. I think it was laser focused on terror. Was that not a wise choice? You look at the target array, the choices, the escalatory levers, the targeting efficacy. The dossier that you were pointing out, the Pakistani dossier, even the PSDA, the evidence, the Maxar imagery, this was not there in Balakot last time. So I'm saying on all these metrics, we've done pretty well, it's quite outstanding. I keep making this point, look at the blunt instrument that the military was in Parakram. And look at what it was this time. Long-range precision strikes. So that this transition from that less than productive strategic restraint to calibrated offensive poise, it's a brilliant thing. The narrative around these things must be spun, the more substantive aspects. Now in this talk that, that question of losses, that will inevitably come up. But is that the substantive thing? So the point I'm making is narration is important, but let the national security debates in the country deepen. Yeah. And let's audit on more substantive issues. Have we not called the nuclear bluff very successfully? Look at just 2-3 more points. Look at the narrative in the international system. Very skillfully done. We showed solidarity across the political spectrum, cross-cultural faces, most eloquent voices across the countries, the global stage, were leaders from the opposition. Shashi Tharoor, Priyanka Chaturvedi. Is that not smart? Very smart political solidarity across. Now let's come to the Chief of Defense Staff, the institution and the persona. See, what is the Chief of Defense Staff's basic role? It's orchestration of forces, battlefield design, decimation of adversary, tri-service synergy. Is all that easy? It took the great Sam Manekshaw to do this with great difficulty. This time, this quiet gentleman, very measured with what he speaks, has done it with great brilliance. I ask, has he not led and delivered the most crushing victory since 1971? Crushing victory since 1971? So what should we prioritize? Battlefield excellence or studio eloquence? It's a democracy. You will hold him to account. But let's get our priorities right. Just 1 minute, that's Barkha, 30 seconds. He's a professional soldier, may not be a very good wordsmith, but he's done well. And I thought his remarks were measured, one word here, out and there. We shouldn't judge him on that. I think he needs to be lauded and needs to be given far more credit. And just two more points. Let's not fall into this adversary trap. In a democracy, we must question and all. But what is the most salient question? Is it who lost how many aircraft or who lost control of the air? Pakistan, as I keep saying, was naked, vulnerable. It was virtual air supremacy. Tell me which air force has achieved it in any conflict in recent times. So now here, should it be transparency or trap? And last point, 5 seconds. In the end, national security must be judged on the metrics of critical acclaim and not popular acclaim. I mean, that will happen.
Okay,
Judgments will not.
you made a,
The best solutions in national security cannot be outsourced to trolls.
you made a number of excellent points, and personally, the day General Chauhan said what he said to Bloomberg, I actually did not understand how some Indian commentators were saying this is the first time the Indian Air Force has said it. No, the Air Marshal Bharti, in his briefing, in response to a similar question on whether India's jets were down, said losses have taken place. It's a combat, but all our pilots are home. General Chauhan repeated that and then said tactical mistakes may have been made, but they were rectified. All our jets flew in the next 2 days and operated at long range. Tavleen, why do you think that there is such a needless focus on General Chauhan's comments in Singapore? He seems unfazed. He has elaborated at great length. He smiled at this whole debate around losses, and he has said that look, it's like in a cricket match. What matters is whether you win, not whether your first 3 overs were poor or bad or could have been better. It's the outcome that matters, and I agree with that. Don't you?
Yeah, I think that there's, anyone who thinks that General Chauhan got it wrong is wrong, because he really has handled it skillfully. And, he's shown diplomacy, which is very unusual in military men. So, I don't have any problem with that. But please let us remember, we did lose the narrative. There was the reason why we had to send out these diplomatic missions across the world was because we lost it. Let me give you an example. The Ukraine strike in Russia yesterday. There are people in the Western media, defense experts, etc., saying that this will go down in history as one of the greatest things, that they had the drones, they moved the drones in 18 months of planning, etc. Why did we not actually be more convincing in the way we told our story? Instead, what I saw was a lot of silly defensiveness, banning Pakistani singers on Spotify, banning this, banning that, closing down websites. We have to be more confident in our narrative, because if we are confident in it, the world will see it that way.
So I have one question to you before Sushant and Dilip respond. Ukraine has the entire Western world backing it, right? The narrative of Ukraine is not set by Zelensky. It is set by Western media. It is set by all of Europe. It's all of NATO backing it. India is alone in this battle, and we have been for decades. Till 9/11 happened, we couldn't even get the world to understand our challenges with terrorism. So do you think that's a fair analogy?
Well, no, listen, excuse me. Don't you think it's our fault? Why are we allowing the world to think that we're not telling the truth? Why do we need to send out those delegations? Because we haven't told our story well, and because there has been, particularly since Narendra Modi became Prime Minister, he hasn't had a press conference. He does not meet the media. Foreign correspondents are harassed in Delhi. If you sort of tell foreign correspondents that they can be thrown out at within 2 months, they're not going to be on your side. And these are powerful guys. If you tell the Economist correspondent that he has to renew his visa every 3 months, and if you threaten to throw out the New York Times, etc., why do you think that they would be on your side? Whereas the Pakistanis, even when they lose, they somehow manage to get their story out there. And, that is the truth, I'm sorry to say.
So, Sushant, let's bring you in at this point. I think there are two ways of looking at this sort of Western response. One is don't bother engaging with Western media. It's ignorant, it's arrogant, it's insular, it doesn't get us, it never has, it never will. Don't bother. If you're not going to bother, then don't care what they say. The other way is to say, no, you've got to engage. The question still remains, who should be engaging? Should it be our military officers? Should it be our diplomats? Should the government have a spokesperson? General Shukla on the weekend said there's a need for a DG Stratcom, strategic communication, immediately. You need something like that because this is not the job of our soldiers. The job of our soldiers is in the battlefield. Is this sort of focus on General Chauhan needless? I think even Tavleen, with her criticism, says he's not to be faulted. And I think we must underline that. This has nothing to do with him. But do you believe that there's a narrative problem, or do you believe that we're dealing with a geopolitical reality where no matter what you do, this narrative problem will exist?
I think Barkha is both things. There is a geopolitical problem. It's an ideological issue for many parts of the world, especially this Western media, which you are talking about. This harassment of the Western media also started because of very unfair and very biased kind of coverage which these guys were doing. They use those familiar tropes, right wing, Hindu, nationalist, etc., etc. You know all of that, right? Half of these guys would use the term Hindutva without knowing what it actually means. And it's basically a dog whistle for going after anybody who speaks about any kind of Hindu assertion. But that aside, I think the point you make is also very well taken. That look, either you just don't bother about it, but I don't think that is an option. You have to engage with the rest of the world. It's part and parcel of the game. And I agree with what General Shukla is saying that you need to have a proper department of strategic communications. And give me a couple of minutes. Let me try and explain. Look, modern warfare, especially this current conflict that we have just seen, it had three fronts. The first was the military front, and I don't think I can do better than what General Shukla has just told you. And what the Pakistanis are now saying that we were hitting them in Peshawar, we were hitting them in Attak, we were hitting them through the length and breadth of their country, and they couldn't do a damn thing. So the Hamid Mirs and those other Ghaspoos fellows that you have been engaging with can keep saying whatever the hell they are saying, but they know that they got backsides got handed to them on a platter. Okay, but the point is that the military success was one side, the diplomatic success, or at least nothing went against us. I don't think anybody, you could have really expected anybody to come and say that, okay, fine, there are two nuclear powers fighting and we are going to encourage one against the other. Everybody was going to say, please show restraint, exactly the kind of words we would use when two countries are fighting, right? We would not say we are backing one country fully, go and ram the other side. We would not say that. So there was that level of virtue signaling, and many people in India felt a little cheated by what happened. And I'm not including the United States in this, which tried to grab all the credit without having done a damn thing. At best, they were postmen, right? Marco Rubio and Donald Trump never entered the scene, but Marco Rubio was at best a postman, nothing more than that. And even there, he was told that we are not listening to him. Ask the Pakis to talk to us directly, and then we will work on this whole thing. So there was that diplomatic aspect. And the third aspect of every conflict, Barkha, is what you might call the information war campaign. And on that, I think we were a dismal failure. And this has nothing to do with what General Chauhan said. It is the sum total of how we've handled the information flows, how we have dealt with, the farming out of information. Why did it take us almost, 3 days before the first press conference of the DGMOs happened? Why could it not have been done? We have to understand we are living in a different world today. This is not the world of 30 years back of the PIB times when, you could issue a press release with the convenience of late night press release before the newspapers went to bed. You are not living in that age. You are living in an age where when attacks were actually taking place in Peshawar, within 5 minutes on Twitter and on other social media platforms, people were saying that look, sirens are going off, drones are attacking out here. This is that age. If your response is going to be to hold the first press conference, which incidentally was much better handled than anything else we had done, but it was just too late. So what you say, where you say, when you say, to whom you are addressing, that is also a very critical part. Barkha, look, I don't expect generals or even diplomats for that matter to know the idiom in which you have to address the public. There is a domestic audience. You have to address that. The idiom for the domestic audience is different. There is an international audience. You have to address that. That idiom is completely different. And then there is the enemy audience, the Pakistanis. You have to address that audience also. And that audience, again, the idiom has to be different. How you are going to deal with them, how you are going to treat them, what are you going to say to
Yeah.
them. We did not factor all these factors in. So I think it is important to get, and part of the reason, Barka, allow me half a minute more. Part of the reason for that is the kind of bureaucratic structures we have for controlling information. Uh, you either have people who simply don't understand information and strategic communications, or you have people who are bureaucrats and are so scared of saying something lest it backfires on them because nobody has actually thought this thing through. Now, you can't have an Indian information service handling strategic communications. You can't have Fauji's alone handling strategic communications, and you can't have diplomats or IAS officers handling it. You need to rethink this entire thing. I'm not saying I have the solution, but you really need to rethink this entire thing before you can, you can actually start joining this war in the way it needs to be done. And it's not that the Pakistanis have done a very good job. The kind of nonsense they have spouted, their media does not have the testicular fortitude to even question the kind of bullshit they have been told. That there were drones flying over in Delhi, that
Yeah.
they had carried out, grid stations were attacked, all kinds of other nonsensical things which these mere thieves are been spreading. None of it
Hmm.
happened. And yet they have been, following what is normally called the swallow and vomit kind of journalism. Nobody has questioned that. None of the Western media guys have asked on what is the kind of propaganda that was being done on Pakistani channels. So quite clearly, I think, we were also left a little wanting in terms of coming out with information with the speed and with the clarity it should have. So, for example, and last point, Barka, we attacked Karachi on the second day,
Mhm.
okay, which was announced by the press conference when they said Malir cantonment. Now, if 99% of the people in India don't know that Malir is the cantonment of Karachi and we attacked Karachi, everybody assumed we attacked the Karachi port. We never attacked the Karachi port, right? We
Yeah.
attacked the air defense systems in Karachi. But
Yeah.
hitting Karachi is the first time anybody has done something like that since 1971. So,
Yeah.
people need to put things in perspective and need to explain that information, need to deliver it much better. Otherwise, we suffer the kind of stuff which we have suffered this time around.
So I think this is a really important point about Karachi, Sushant. By the way, for the record, I have not engaged with Hamid Mir in decades, and our channel is blocked and
You
banned in
haven't missed much.
Pakistan. I know.
You haven't missed anything. He's
On a
quite an
lighter
idiot,
note,
actually.
he's an idiot and he's a troublemaker, but that's a different debate. This Karachi point is really important because, yes, some of our channels said Karachi port was attacked and that was wrong. But we now know, we know it from satellite images. We know, as you said, from our own military briefing. We know from air warfare experts like Tom Cooper that the air defense system of Karachi was not just targeted, it was hit successfully to the extent that it was out of operation. Karachi's air defense, was hit so severely that it could not protect the city of Karachi. We know this from independent experts. This is not me sort of making some sort of rhetorical point. But Dilip, I think Sushant makes a great point that it was probably buried in the very restrained, technical way that military briefings take place. And it actually wasn't wrong. And guess what? The Pakistan dossier says that locations in Karachi were hit. That dossier is on your screen. This is the dossier they're taking around the world. I think what Sushant is saying is, were we too coy? Were we basically too coy about our military successes?
Barkha, the first thing to understand is that you cannot have a system where we are hyphenating patriotism with narrative buying. So I would say that please understand that whatever is being said needs to be communicated clearly, and whatever you say cannot be taken as an index of your patriotism. That's first. Unfortunately, that's the way most debates have gone, and that is the reason why both in Pakistan and in India, when measured on a global scale, the tendency is to not take most of it very seriously. That is a major drawback. The second thing is, as far as General Chauhan is concerned, as somebody who has done narrative building and managing complex communications of messages, let me say one thing very clearly, that he should have, as the kids of today will say, got himself a room. You cannot, as the CDS, give an interview in a hotel lobby. The whole majesty of his office was, in a sense, ruined by the fact that he chose, or he was made to or allowed to give an interview in a hotel lobby. Not allowed, not accepted. Messaging comes secondary. What comes first is the imagery. Narrative. Yes, I'm glad he said what he has said today, especially given the fact that today is the finals of the cricket match. Choosing that analogy, great timing, wonderful. And I think that works. But the thing is that you know that when you're sending your chief of defense staff abroad, if you've asked him to go ahead and engage with media, you should have prepared him. And what Sushant said, a department of strategic narrative building should have been. It doesn't need the creation of.
What do you think he said? Sorry, I'm interrupting, but what do you think he said that was so problematic?
I don't think anything he said specifically was problematic, Barkha. I'm saying the way he said it and the fact that he should have had a certain narrative, which he did not have. He was doing it largely on the fly. I do not find that advantageous India. You have to recognize, as everybody on the panel has said, that we are in a situation, unfortunately, where the rest of the world seems to be arranged against us. So you have to be far more prepared, and you have to get your messaging right. Just give you an example. You've been putting up the visuals of Pakistan's dossier. Our message has been that we did targeted striking of terrorist outfits. They are going to twist this around and say that India was targeting all kinds of places.
No, but this was later, Dilip. This was later. This was not on the first night. We hit them on the terror basis the first night. Jai Shankar then said, which he was targeted for by the opposition, that we conveyed that if you do nothing more, we'll do nothing more. They then sent drones and missiles into our cities. We hit back, and that's when this happened. I just want to be very factual about the timeline. Yeah.
You know, I fully agree and endorse your reading of the timeline, and that's wonderful. But the rest of the world is not going to go into, they did this on day 1, we did this on day 2, they said this on day 3, we did this on day 4. That's not how narrative works. The total time and space for this, you know, a bit like the Wisden Almanac and cricket, when Jains or anyone seriously in this business analyzes it, they are going to look at numbers, they're going to look exactly at what happened on day 1, day 2. But as far as narratives are concerned, they get built very fast, and then they become part of the editorial landscape. And you know that as well as I do, that once that gets cast in a certain direction, changing it takes a hell of a lot of work, and we will actually be battling that for some time to come, unless we have a sequence of such messages that happen today coming out very quickly.
Okay, let me play out another clip of General Chauhan's speech today. He seemed, by the way, quite unruffled by all of the attention around him. He was smiling. He took extempore questions from the floor, from the audience. But he did make this comment about how on the 10th of May, and this is very important because this is the day that the war seems to, or the conflict seems to reach a crescendo. But it also is the day which ends with a halt in hostilities. And he actually says that Pakistan was planning a 48-hour operation. They had just announced their own operation against India that morning. But because of the power of, India's retaliatory force against Pakistani air bases, air systems, air defense systems. They were forced to fold up in 8 hours. Let's take a look at this clip.
Although lost by Pakistan on 10th of May at about 1 a.m., its aim was to get down India to its knees in 48 hours. Multiple attacks were lost. And in some manner, they have escalated this conflict, which we had actually hit only terrorist targets, but also into the military domain. From their perspective, it would have been rational in the sense they would have said that you use military means to hit these targets. But it was also rational on their part, operation which they thought they'll continue for 48 hours, folded up in about 8 hours. And on 10th, when they picked up the telephone and said they wanted to talk. And I think that the rationale behind this the realization coming in stemmed from two facts. That one is they must have assumed that if they continued this mode, they're likely to lose much more. So hence they picked up the telephone. And second thing, since they had struck us at multiple fronts, they still did not have the benefit of understanding what they had struck.
So, General Shukla, I want to bring you in here. You know, trolls might say, oh, why is he calling the Pakistan? Kind of stupid discourse sometimes on social media. What he's actually saying is Pakistan rationally understood that they could not continue with their 48-hour operation that they had planned because their air defense was hit and they were not able to breach anything in India. That is the sum total of it. So it was a rational assessment of failure, or a rational assessment that we need to call a halt to this. So we need to call, you know, the Pakistan DGMO calls our DGMO, and the rest, as they say, is well documented. Now react to everything you've heard. You know, I think everybody is united on one thing, that there is no ambiguity over the military, neither how General Chauhan, what he said, and of course the sort of very successful operation that took place, compelling Pakistan to make this phone call. But Sushant's example stays with me, that Malli can't, who knows this except like the 2,000 people who follow India-Pakistan conflict? Did people understand it? Did the media understand it? Did the media understand the difference between Karachi Port and Malli Can't, between Karachi Air Defense and, Karachi Port? So respond to everything you've heard.
So see, my response is that all this stuff is pretty complicated. When Manekshaw was magnanimous to those 93,000 POWs, what was it? It was soldierly grace. So here he is acknowledging that the opponent is not a fool. He's also rational, but I still outwitted him. I still beat him. So I see no contradiction here. In fact, what he says is what Shehbaz Sharif also said in a statement. Ki bhai hum namaz ke baad ye karne wale the and we got preempted. So in fact, this statement has been, the truth of the veracity of it has been acknowledged by Shehbaz Sharif. But I'd like to make, one or two points. We must have a narrative in the West. But which part of the West? Are you telling me that the New York Times and the Economist is always militarily accurate on national security matters? It is not. I'll tell you. Go to the Foreign Affairs November's edition last year. There's an article on Total War by Meera Kalin, civilian. I don't know who or she is. It resonates with me. It resonates with the military. It is substantive. Go to the War on the Rocks. It resonates with me. That part of the Western narrative I must win over. I've spoken to a number of people, informed people across the Western world. By and large, the strategic commentariat is extremely appreciative of what's happening. So it is which part of the West do we win to win over? That part of the West which said under a nuclear umbrella, you can go on a terror rampage? If we want to win even that part of the West, then as Sushant was saying, all right, have a DG Stratcom, have a group of officers who understand the press gaggle and these traps and all that, even do that. But I'm saying with the substantive part of the West, and this is the point about critical acclaim and popular acclaim. Critical acclaim is important. Run after the popular acclaim, but you can't be subservient to the political popular acclaim. So all this has to be done. It's not that we've not done things in the past.
Can I ask you whose job?
5 seconds. Okay. 5 seconds.
Okay, all right.
After Balakot, we realized that our media, in fact, the last thing was quite a disaster after Balakot. The army set up a DGIW, Director General Information Warfare. I don't know where he's vanished. He should have been up here. So this DG Stratcom and this office of the DG Stratcom, I've been saying for very long. Now cross-pollination comes in. General Chauhan in his office should have a media advisor not as somebody as senior as Dilip Saab, but somebody, a middle piece officer. So this cross-pollination is extremely important, getting technologists, media advisors, so on and so forth. But I'm saying at the end of it, the military substance matters. Those in the know of things know that India has registered a pretty comprehensive victory. We must be, hold our ear to all this, but not get, swarmed by all of this stuff.
I think
In the end, I think, if you take the action, narration, calculus in aggregate terms, I think we'll get an A+. We haven't done too badly.
And so, Tavleen, why do you think we've done badly? And I think there's an important question here just before you react. I know you disagree with General Shukla. The New York Times and the Washington Post, and I say this as somebody who's written for the Washington Post for 7 years and counting now, they have a certain 1990s understanding of India that hasn't moved a lot, especially when it comes to any conflict between India and Pakistan. It is immediately presented with this graph that says India and Pakistan have fought 4 wars over Jammu and Kashmir. I have fought with editors who will force you to add that line because what has happened right now is not a fight over Jammu and Kashmir. What happened in 2611 is not a fight over Jammu and Kashmir. The Lashkar and the Jaish are not a fight over Jammu and Kashmir. So we have to know that we're dealing with entrenched cliches, if that's the kindest I can say, entrenched cliches. Go ahead, Tavleen.
It's our fault. It's our fault. When we got rid of Article 370, why did we not make clear ever? Why did the political establishment in Delhi not try to convince? And by the way, don't dismiss the New York Times and all, as the general just did. You're talking about military circles somewhere, and I'm a soldier's daughter. Okay, I understand how the military works probably as well as you do. But, nobody's interested in that. What we are trying to convince is public opinion in a village that the world has become. And in that, we did lose out because we never at any stage, for a start on Article 370, everyone is in agreement in India that it had become a wall. It was not at all facilitating either the Kashmiris or us. It was a nightmare. We did nothing to correct the impression that this was an attempt to take away autonomy in Kashmir. Do you remember that? Why is it that the Prime Minister's office does not have a media cell? Do you know that, I don't know whether you have special access, but there is no way of finding out what the Prime Minister's office is thinking. There is no communication. I mean, they need Dilip more than the army does. There is no political communication, and we did lose the narrative. We've lost it literally in the past 5 years.
With whom? With whom did we lose the narrative?
With the general public, with public opinion in the West. We're not talking about little groups, the New York Times is bad and they hate us. No, nobody hates you. But, if you do not correct the narrative convincingly. The other point that I want to make is, do you know, when I used to cover Pakistan a lot, I've probably covered it more than you have, and I've covered it from the time of Ziaul. And I used to always feel very proud when I came back to India to see what a confident country we were compared to Pakistan. We didn't have people following journalists around with Uzis like I've had in Islamabad. But, we were a different country. But we're not able to convince even ourselves of that now. Do you know? I mean, the Pakistanis have beaten us at this time and time again, and we should be ashamed.
Okay, those are very strong words. I know, Sushant, you and Dilip, you wanted to come in, but I'll just allow General Shukla a brief interjection. Very briefly, sir. You wanted to come in there. Yeah.
See, the point that I'm making is that there are very substantive issues of national security to which the narrative must take care of those. For example, this business of doctrine strategy for strategic communication is extremely important. We must labor over it for 3 to 4 months. What is the message we are sending to multiple audiences? What Sushant was saying. What was peaceful rise of China? It was an exercise in deception. It was narrative. It depends on whom you're signaling to. The other point I want to make it, you see, power projection is important. But where should that power projection, what should it address? POK or power projection across Malacca? So I'm making these kind of points. They need to be, and one last point it's not just a matter of Western, those kind of audiences. If you want, in the Hindi speaking heartland, there is great differentiation between substantive stuff and the superfluous. You turn to a guy called Saurabh Sahi, I watch him very carefully on Red Mike. Hindi mein bolta hai. His analysis of Ukraine, all the conflicts is masterly. So I'm saying that we need to deepen our conversations and not just get unduly carried away by New York Times and The Economist on military matters. They are not the best in the business.
So let me bring in Sushant here. Who do we want to convey this message to? I would assume the most important recipient of this message has to be Pakistan. More than anybody else, the most important recipient, Tavleen disagrees, but I would say, to start with, what was the message of this operation? That if you send in terrorists to kill our people, we will respond with force if needed, as needed. If we believe that they have got the message because they're the ones who picked up the phone and called us, does the main entity that needed to receive the message, have they got it? Or do you seem to agree with Tavleen that information handling should have been much better? But at what level and aimed at whom?
So, Barkha, I'll come to your question, but I have to say a couple of things before that. Tableen talks about journalists being followed with men carrying Uzis in Pakistan. In fact, there are Western journalists, including from the New York Times and many of the other newspapers, who have been caught up, beaten up, forcefully deported. All kinds of things have been done to them. And yet, you will have these journalists go back to Pakistan to a certain line. And I can tell you one thing, that the Western media works on a particular agenda. And I'll give you just one example, which I think Tavleen should appreciate. Tavleen was a very active journalist in the 80s when terrorism was ravaging through Punjab. In fact, she was one of the few people who would go right out there and report from the hinterland in ways nobody else had done, right? And I can say that I was quite a fanboy of her reporting at that point of time. The point is, with all that reporting that we did and all the access that was given, what was the narrative in the Western media? Did the Western media even bother for a minute to say that, look, 30,000 people were killed in Punjab, more people were killed in Kashmir later on, there was an Islamist terror wave which had come into India? What was the Western media approach until 9/11 happens? When it hit them, suddenly they woke up and it became it became an international agenda. Suddenly it became a global war on terror. Otherwise, it was everybody's individual war. So one is that. So when we say, and yet I will say that it is not just the specialist or the audiences, the critical audiences that General Shukla talks about that we need to address, but there is also public opinion that we need to address, and we need to try and figure out a way on how we can do that, because at the end of the day, narratives are shaped, politics is made on the basis of what, not the critical media which General Shukla is talking about. It's not foreign affairs which makes public perceptions. It is, for want of a better word, rags like New York Times and Washington Post who actually make those agendas. That's a fact, right? Secondly, there is this whole question of rationality which you raised. And look, I think General Chauhan said the correct thing. And I'll tell you the reason why. The Pakistanis, and by saying that the Pakistanis have behaved rationally, he has basically undercut their entire thing that we are mad, crazy Islamist mullahs who will fire nuclear weapons at the first instance. And he said, look, these guys have been rational, and the proof of the pudding is in the eating. After we attacked them, what was the Pakistani response? Did they fire nukes on us? No. In fact, they tried to retaliate in a very, very calibrated and graded manner. And for every retaliation they did, we upped the ante. So I think that is what, everybody was climbing those escalation ladder in a very steady manner rather than in a knee-jerk manner. So I would imagine that that is the standpoint of rationality. And I've forgotten your question, Balka.
No, I agree with you on the rationality. I was just saying that the level of conversation is sometimes so stupid on social media that people will attack him for that. Not that I didn't understand what he meant, but my question was, who is this narrative aimed at? Who is the
No, no.
recipient of the
Yeah.
message? Yeah,
No, Barkha, I think it has to be everybody, but most of all the enemy. And the problem with the enemy is that, Pakistan is a kind of a zombie nation. They're full of, there are a bunch of zombies. They, the one thing which they can never accept is defeat at the hand of the Hindu kafir. That is a no-go area for them because it undermines all that martial myth which they have about them, so they can never admit it, which is why you will see even people like I don't want to name them because I don't want to even take their
yeah,
name, it spoils the taste in my mouth, but a lot of these characters have been saying that in Kargil also we had won. Musharraf used to say it, but a lot of these journalists have said that in Kargil also it was the Americans who intervened and we had to withdraw. Barkha, you covered that conflict. What happened to them in Kargil? They
yeah,
even say that 1971 we would have won the war, but for this, the treacherous Hindu, right? In 65, so they had won the war.
yeah,
Every war they have won, and every war they have lost territory, right?
yeah.
Which they will never question their own armed forces simply because they cannot accept it. And which is what is the message we need to convince them. Which is why I say treat them like dirt, treat them with utter contempt. We give a lot of respect to the Pakistanis, and I can't for the life of me understand why. You have to puncture their balloon of this Islamic superiority which they have, this martial superiority which they have. You have to puncture that balloon. And one way of doing it is ignoring them. Second is treating them with utter contempt, which is what we should do. And the third thing is that you have to psychologically have a kind of dominance over them. In many areas we do, but in this particular conflict, the way
Yeah.
we should have handled the information flow, we should have imposed a psychological domination over them, which unfortunately we failed to do.
Okay. Before Dilip comes in, Tavleen, you have a brief interjection. Yeah, Tavleen.
Why are we so worried? I was actually, Sushant actually said to some, why are we so worried about what Pakistan thinks? And actually, the time that we did succeed in sort of softening them was when we used our soft power. At the time when they could come across and see that India was not some demonic country, that it was actually a country that they wanted to be part of. They wanted
But
to trade with India and things like that. So what the way to do that? But we should stop being so obsessed with Pakistan. It embarrasses me to see all this obsession. Our enemy is China. Why are we never talking about the fact that the Chinese
okay.
are standing behind
Okay,
Pakistan?
Dilip and then Sushant has an interjection, but first Dilip because he's been waiting. Dilip Cherian, go ahead.
There have been several questions about narrative building and also about who are we addressing. I think we must not forget that in the heat of war, the IMF chose to give a loan to Pakistan. That is also an audience we need to recognize. These are people who need to be influenced, and we need to make sure that whatever the method that needs to be used to address people in decision making, people who take decisions about investing in India going forward over the next 5 years, get the message that this is what India stands for, this is what our security doctrine is, this is how we treat those who attempt to trigger terrorism in the country. That will be the message that matters. I think building that narrative is a complex narrative. It cannot be left only to soldiers to do. We need to have them also involved. We need to have civilians involved. We need to have diplomats involved. But they need to understand that the message is going to ensure that the future of India, India's economic future, is protected and growing. And I think we often forget that in this hysteria of whether one plane was down, 3 planes were down. That is not going to make too much of a difference going forward, except to pure analysts who are sitting in jails and figuring out what to do.
Okay. And I think that's an important point because I also think the stronger you are as a country, the more heft you carry in the world. And maybe that's the route that one has to focus on. Sushant and then General Shukla, and then we'll take last comments. Sushant? Yeah.
Okay, so I had two comments, but I'll add a third one. Because Dilip in the last part said, let's not get into this, how many planes we've lost. And while I agree with it, my analogy is that, there have been people who would switch off the television after Sachin Tendulkar and Virat Kohli got out and they didn't care whether India has won the match or not. And this is what has happened this time around. Okay. And this is like the opposing team saying, oh, we got Virat and Sachin out, and Rohit Sharma also got out cheaply, so we have won the match. शुरू के ओवर में हमने कर दिया, after that we won the match. This is as stupid as that, but I don't expect anything better from the Pakistanis. Secondly, on something on what Dilip said, again, this is the idiom in which we have to address. Look, one, the IMF program was already an ongoing, and this was just the second tranche which had to be released by the IMF, which meant that it was going to be done on technical matters. Now, when you approach the IMF and you decide that you are going to challenge this, then you should get your act correct, which is where the idiom comes in. Barkha, allow me half a minute to explain. You should have not challenged the IMF loan, or you should have not put an objection on it on the basis of that, well, money is fungible, the Pakistanis will use it for terrorism, etc. You should have done it on the basis on which the IMF was giving the loan, technical and economic parameters. Whether the Pakistanis have lived up to their commitments, whether they are cooking their books, and all that you need is a good economist to look at Pakistani data to say that all of these books are cooked as badly as Nawaz Sharif's company's balance sheet, right? This is what this country is all about. And you should question the IMF on that. They might have still approved it. But you should now question them on technical and economic parameters rather than political issues. Because political issues will not wash down in IMF. And the last point, look, Tavleen might think that, the Indian soft power actually influenced Pakistanis. No, it did not. They came, they partaked in it, they had their fun. It did not change their attitude towards India. It did not soften their attitude towards India. It did not end the hatred inside Pakistan, which has only grown over the years. So forget about what they say in polite company. All you need, Barkha, you scratch them a bit in a couple of your programs and look at the kind of invective that has been
Yeah.
hurled on you. Your entire 30, 40 years career is now being questioned that you are a Sanghi, which is not necessarily, in my view, it's not necessarily an abuse, which you are obviously not. And you and I agree on 500 things, including on politics, including on ideology. And yet we can be friends, which is something the Pakistanis cannot understand. The point I'm trying to make is that all you had to do was to stand up for this country. And you invited the kind of hatred which they would have for their worst enemy. So
Yeah.
forget about this soft power on Pakistanis. The only language these Pakistani, Punjabi Muslims understand is hard power. If you can kick them and treat them with utter contempt, that is something which has an impact. You treat them with respect, they'll climb on your head and piss on your head.
Well, I just before General Shukla comes in, I'm thank you for making that last point, because having reported this beat for 30 years, I have not encountered a Pakistani liberal, quote unquote, who has condemned the Jaish-e-Mohammed and the Lashkar-e-Taiba in the last fortnight. Not even one. Not even one. They're not simply not willing to answer the question I posed to Hina Rabani Khar on the Piers Morgan show. Do you see the Jaish and the Lashkar as terror groups? And if you do, why do they function with the impunity they do? So I think that we have to acknowledge that the way our states, our nations have evolved is fundamentally different. And that is why the hyphenation is so infuriating, or the re-hyphenation attempts by America in particular. General Shukla, let's bring you in, and then last comments.
So Najam Sethi calling Pahalgam a false flag operation.
Yeah.
That amazes me to the extreme.
Yeah.
But the 2 points I want to make is, I hope I didn't miscommunicate. When I was distinguishing between critical and popular acclaim, I'm saying we must attend to the popular acclaim, but the substance of the military actions cannot be guided by the popular acclaim. That's the distinction I'm making. It cannot be swayed by the popular acclaim. And just one last point. See, what really surprised me in this, and a couple of very good friends, rational people, within an hour of General Chauhan saying this, messaging to me, he should be sacked, moron, Now, this is kind of stupid stuff.
Terrible, terrible.
This is what this is the kind of thing which is just simply idiotic. Now, can you even
Absolutely.
pander to this?
No.
So these are the two brief points I want.
No, I think
Thank
that's an excellent point. That populism is not the same as narrative. We have to be clear. This kind of lowest common denominator brownie points is not what the Chief of Defense Staff needs to be catering to or bothered about. And I couldn't agree with you more. Now, before we take last comments from all of you, we also have political fault lines that have been wrenched open at home. And we need to talk a little bit about that in the context of the larger narrative wars. So we have all of these bipartisan delegations, Shashi Tharoor, Manish Tiwari, Asad Owaisi, now Salman Khurshid, becoming the face of the India story on Operation Sindoor. But at home, you have the Congress in particular speaking in a very different language. Rahul Gandhi today has accused the Prime Minister of quote unquote running away. And this he has said in the context, he started to talk about the caste census, but he also said it in the context of Trump and the India-Pakistan halt in hostilities. Take a look at this latest from Mr. Gandhi.
का वो गला घोट रहे हैं। तो पहली लड़ाई संविधान की है। एक तरफ हम कांग्रेस पार्टी, हमारी विचारधारा, और दूसरी तरफ आरएसएस जो संविधान के खिलाफ खड़े हैं। दूसरी लड़ाई सामाजिक न्याय की। जीतू ने कहा, जाति जनगणना के बारे में बोला। पार्लियामेंट हाउस में, लोकसभा में मैंने देश से वायदा किया था कि कुछ भी हो जाए, जाति जनगणना लोकसभा और राज्यसभा में पास होगा। ये बीजेपी आरएसएस वालों को अब मैं अच्छी तरह जानता हूं। इन पर थोड़ा सा दबाव डालो, थोड़ा सा धक्का मारो, डर के भाग जाते हैं ये लोग। जैसे उधर से ट्रंप ने एक इशारा किया, फोन उठाया, कहा मोदी जी क्या कर रहे हो? नरेंद्र सरेंडर, और जी हजूर करके नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने ट्रंप के इशारे का पालन किया। आपको एक समय याद होगा जब फोन कॉल नहीं आया था, 7th फ्लीट आई थी, 71 की लड़ाई में 7th फ्लीट आई थी, हथियार आए थे, एयरक्राफ्ट कैरियर आया था। इंदिरा गांधी जी ने कहा मुझे कुछ जो करना है मैं करूंगी। ये फर्क है।
So the unity that we saw at home has broken. I'll start with you, Dilip. You know, there are two ways of looking at this. Does it help India? Does it help the Congress?
I don't think it helps at all. It doesn't help our case. But unfortunately, Barkha, you and I and all others in the media business, Tavleen, everybody, can see that politics and the rhetoric of politics has descended to, absolutely abysmal levels at all levels. So I would assume that it is expected of Rahul to maintain higher standards, but is it possible in this kind of divisive environment? The question hangs heavy in the air. I'm so glad though that on the obverse, we've also seen that Congress spokespersons are doing the most fantastic kind of, out of the crease batting that they're doing effectively and with great impact domestically. And that, I think, is the bigger message that we should be proud of.
So how do we square, Sushant, this messaging with Shashi Tharoor, Manish Tiwari, Salman Khurshid, Anand Sharma outside of India? Like, what is going on? And of course, the Pakistanis are going to pick this up. Of course, they're going to pick it up. Can we
Yeah,
unmute
so
Sushant? Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
but the Pakistanis will of course pick it up, but this is not a message that is being given or being sought to be given to the Pakistanis. I think many of the other democracies around the world, and we haven't gone to China, for example, we've only mostly gone to democracies. I think they understand that how a country remains united when it's talking about an external threat, and how they will go hammer and tongs at each other domestically. So, for example, you had somebody like Asaduddin Owaisi saying publicly, in fact, outside India, that look, I have a lot of differences with the ruling party, but I am an Indian. So out here, I am batting for India. I'm not batting for the BJP, which is fair enough, which is exactly what Manish Tiwari and Shashi Tharoor and Salman Khurshid are doing. It's not as though they're going to go and join the BJP tomorrow. Uh, so I think that distinction has to be made very clear. And my own sense is that look, in India, there is politics in every goddamn thing you do. Okay, there is nothing which is without politics. The point is that what is, as Dilip very correctly says, what is the level at which you are going to be doing that politics? What is the kind of language you are using? What is the kind of agendas you are trying to, propagate? That is what is the critical part. And on that, I suppose we are really falling back. And the last point I want to make is that I personally think that maybe the Congress party, in its desperation, is shooting itself in the foot uh, by taking the kind of positions they're taking. They can just as well question the government on a whole lot of substantive issues, maybe even play the ultra national card and say that, listen, why did you not follow through? Why did you not do certain things? Why don't you do certain things? But they're not doing that. What they are trying to do is throw mud. I'm not entirely convinced that this is going to
Yeah.
work, because the same questions can be asked of Rahul Gandhi when he talks about his grandmother. Then he should also say that, well, in 1971, Mrs. Gandhi could stand up to the Seventh Fleet because the Soviets were sending their own ships to back up India, right, under the treaty. Secondly, he should also then answer to us that why did Mrs. Gandhi, after an astounding victory on the in the eastern part, and we had advantages on the western part, why didn't she end the Kashmir problem there and then when Pakistan was on the mat? What prevented her? Why doesn't he tell us the truth of who prevented Mrs. Gandhi and forced her to back off and sign on the dotted line even in Shimla? Why don't they tell us?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
point is that this is a shoe that can be hit on everybody. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
suppose you should be a little careful in how you frame the issue.
I actually agree with you, Tavleen. I want to bring you in. It started with saying Jaishankar gave away the war secrets, which thankfully they stopped following that line because they realized how bizarre it sounded. Um, how does the Congress for itself square Tharoor and Manish Tiwari, Salman Khurshid defending the abrogation of 370 with the positions they're taking at home?
By the way, to talk about the opinions of Rahul Gandhi is like taking Bilawal Bhutto seriously. Okay, because really, this is he's now reached a level of juvenility where it's hard to believe that a senior Congress, because he's no longer the young face of the Congress, he's middle aged, and that he would make so irresponsible a statement as to say Narendra surrender and all this kind. This is really juvenile stuff. I actually think he's harmed himself and the Congress party more than he's harmed India. So, as far as I'm concerned, the Pakistanis, if they want to, take him as seriously as they take Bilawal Bhutto, because actually they have taken him seriously, they've sent him off to Washington. But really, the Congress party, it's a very, very interesting thing that has happened, because what we're seeing is what the Congress party could be if the Gandhi family would back off and stay in the background and let the real politicians in the Congress party come forward. They're never going to do it, which is why they've destroyed this party. But in fact, what we're seeing is that we're seeing the Gandhi family with its idiocy and and real Congress politicians who are doing a much better job.
That's a great point about how Rahul's comments actually show up his own sort of infantile interventions in this conversation. As Tavleen says, General Shukla, I'm giving you the last word on the narrative debate at home and abroad.
So I think in matters of national security, the role of the opposition is extremely salient, if not sacred. They must hold the proposition to account. But the point I would like to make is you look at economics. So on economics, the opposition will question the ruling party on issues of inflation, fiscal deficit, deep technical matters. Why do they not question the proposition here today on issues like, say, defense spending? Is it adequate for the range of threats that we have got? Do we need to revisit not just, not increase defense expenditure, but to revisit the metrics of our economic statecraft? I think there is much to be done there. Issues like the AD held against Pakistan, is this AD topology good enough for a China fight? There are deep substantive issues there. And I think the time has come now, 75 years down the line, where the polity must mature in terms of raising these kind of questions. And I think these kind of questions too will have strategic, military, political resonance. So they must be raised.
Absolutely. And if only that were the discourse that we were having, what percentage of GDP, what do we need to do now that everybody and their uncle can get a drone? What if drones are in the hands of terrorists tomorrow? These are the serious conversations we should be having in the context of Ukraine. Instead, unfortunately, and there I take your point.
Even the media does not raise these issues.
Well, we try. We do try.
No, not you. I'm saying newspaper columns and all that. There is a lot to be done in these years.
We leave it there. Thank you so much for a very robust yet civil conversation, which is, I think, how best conversations should be conducted. Dilip Cherian, Tavleen Singh, Sushant Sareen, General Shukla, and to our audience, thank you and see you tomorrow. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Wojha Story and support independent, robust journalism.